Welcome back, chosen one. And before anyone pretends this topic is too dark or too crazy, let's say it plainly. The reason this conversation even exists is because you didn't break. The whispers stopped being casual and started becoming intentional. The jealousy stopped being emotional and turned spiritual. Somewhere along the way, people realized that ignoring you wasn't working, mocking you wasn't working, and draining you emotionally wasn't working either. So they escalated, quietly, in secret, through intentions they thought you'd never detect. But here's the part they didn't expect. You're still here, not weakened, not confused, not afraid, just untouched. And that's exactly why this truth is coming out now. A spiritual practitioner didn't expose this to scare you. They exposed it because patterns don't lie. Because when something keeps failing again and again, there's a reason. Death spells, evil intentions, energy attacks, words spoken behind your back meant to lower your frequency. All of it failed, not because the world is harmless, but because you are protected in a way most people will never understand. What really unsettled them wasn't that nothing happened to you. It was that you became calmer, clearer, and more focused after they tried. That's when panic set in. That's when they realized the truth they were hoping to avoid. That some people aren't meant to be destroyed, no matter how badly others want it. So stay right here. Because once you understand why these attacks fail on you, you'll stop questioning your survival and start recognizing your position. And before we go any deeper, press the like button and subscribe to return the energy and keep this message moving through the world. You stopped reacting, and that broke their control. At some point in your life, something very quiet but very powerful changed inside you. You didn't announce it. You didn't plan it. You just stopped reacting. The things that used to push your buttons didn't hit the same anymore. Comments that once hurt now felt distant. Situations that once pulled you into arguments suddenly didn't seem worth your energy. People noticed, even if they didn't say it out loud, because they were used to a version of you that responded on cue. They expected a reaction. And when it didn't come, their sense of control started slipping. Before this shift, your emotions were easy to access, not because you were weak, but because you cared. You wanted to be understood. You wanted fairness. You wanted respect. And some people learned to use that. They knew exactly what to say to make you angry, guilty, defensive, or anxious. Once your emotions were triggered, they felt powerful. That emotional pull gave them a sense of influence over you, even if they never admitted it. That's how most negative energy works. It doesn't force its way in. It waits for you to open the door. But then you stopped opening it. You didn't stop feeling. You stopped engaging. There's a difference. You learned that not every comment deserves a reply. Not every accusation needs clarification. Not every misunderstanding needs fixing. You realized that constantly explaining yourself was exhausting and pointless. Some people don't want clarity, they want control. And once you saw that, you pulled back without drama. No speeches, no final confrontations, just distance. That's when things really changed. When you stopped reacting, their usual tactics stopped working. The emotional hooks had nothing to grab onto. Fear didn't rise the way it used to. Anger passed through instead of settling. Obsession faded. And without those emotional reactions, the energy they were sending had nowhere to land. It's like throwing a stone into water that isn't there anymore. Nothing ripples. Nothing responds. What looked like silence from the outside was actually strength. You weren't freezing. You were conserving. You weren't avoiding, you were choosing. By staying calm, you took your power back without a fight. You didn't need to prove anything. You didn't need to win an argument. You simply removed access to your inner world. And that's the part people don't talk about enough. Energy needs permission. It needs engagement. It needs emotional investment. Once you stopped giving that, the influence disappeared. Not because the world suddenly became kinder, but because you became more grounded. You learned where your energy belongs and where it doesn't. Now, instead of reacting, you observe. Instead of defending, you move on. And that quiet choice changed everything. You didn't overpower anyone. You outgrew the game. Your survival already rewrote the spiritual contract. There was a moment in your life, maybe more than one, when the people around you were quietly convinced you wouldn't make it through. They didn't always say it out loud, but you could feel it in the way they watched you struggle. Some waited for you to give up. Some expected you to fall apart emotionally. Others thought one more hit, one more loss, one more disappointment would finally finish you. In their minds, there was a deadline on your strength, a point where you were supposed to break. But you didn't. You lived through something that should have ended you, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. And that survival did more than just keep you breathing. It changed the rules around you. Before that moment, life felt like it was testing whether you could endure. After that moment, it felt different. Heavier in responsibility, quieter in chaos. Almost like the storm moved past you instead of through you. That's because something shifted on a deeper level. When you survive what was meant to destroy you, the story rewrites itself. The version of you that was fragile, unsure, or dependent didn't make it through, but the core of you did. And once that happens, destruction stops working the same way. Life doesn't keep trying to break what already proved it can't be broken. Instead, it starts reshaping it. People who were rooting for your collapse felt this shift too, even if they couldn't explain it. The energy changed. Their confidence in your downfall disappeared. What they expected to be your ending turned into a turning point. And that unsettled them. Because once the moment passed, they couldn't go back and relive it. You crossed a line they didn't think you'd cross. From that point on, challenges didn't hit you the same way. Pain still showed up, but it didn't define you. Loss still happened, but it didn't erase you. You became someone who bends instead of shatters, someone who adapts instead of disappears. The things meant to harm you started shaping you instead. That's not luck. It's growth earned through survival. There's a quiet authority that comes from living through your worst chapter. You stop fearing endings because you've already seen one and walked away from it. You stop believing threats because you know what real danger felt like, and you're still here. That awareness changes how life interacts with you. Harm loses its power when it's no longer unfamiliar. Your survival became evidence, not just to others, but to yourself. Evidence that the timeline people imagined for you was wrong. Evidence that the limit they placed on you never existed. Once that proof was established, the contract changed. You weren't here to be erased. You were here to evolve. And once evolution begins, destruction no longer has permission to finish the story. You carry responsibility, not just destiny. A lot of people misunderstand what protection really means. They think it's about being lucky, gifted, or somehow above others. But that's not how it works. You're not protected because you're special, in a dramatic sense. You're protected because you're needed. There's a difference. Being special feeds ego. Being needed carries responsibility. And your life carries more weight than you may realize. There are moments ahead of you that haven't happened yet. Conversations that will change someone's direction. Words you'll say without realizing how deeply they land. Choices you'll make that quietly affect more than just you. Some people teach through speeches. Others teach through presence. You're the second type. The way you move, the way you survive, the way you stay standing when life gets heavy. It sends a message to people watching you, even when you don't know they're watching. That's why interruption doesn't work on you. When something tries to end you too early, emotionally, mentally, or physically, it clashes with unfinished purpose. And when purpose is unfinished, protection activates on its own. Not in a loud, cinematic way. No warning signs, no dramatic rescue scenes, just subtle redirections, delays that don't make sense. Situations that should have gone wrong, but somehow didn't. People who meant harm, losing interest, or losing access. It all happens quietly. You might not always feel chosen. In fact, most of the time, it feels like pressure, responsibility without a clear instruction manual. You feel pulled to keep going even when you're tired. You feel compelled to grow even when it's uncomfortable. That's not destiny being glamorous. That's responsibility asking you to stay present. Protection doesn't remove difficulty. It makes sure difficulty doesn't erase you. This is also why attacks dissolve without explanation. There's no dramatic ending because there doesn't need to be one. When something doesn't align with purpose, it simply doesn't proceed. Like a message that fails to send. Like a plan that never quite comes together. From the outside, it looks like nothing happened. From the inside, something important was preserved. People who try to harm you often don't realize they're aiming at something bigger than their emotions. They think it's personal. They think it's about ego, jealousy, or control. But they're actually pushing against a current that's moving forward regardless of them. And currents don't argue. They carry. Your responsibility isn't to fight or prove anything. It's to stay intact, to keep learning, to keep showing up as yourself. The protection around you isn't a reward. It's a safeguard for what hasn't unfolded yet. You're not here to be taken out early. You're here to complete something only you can complete. And until that's done, whatever tries to stop you will quietly fail. Dark intentions expose themselves around you. Something strange happens when people carry dark intentions toward you. And you've probably noticed it by now. Instead of you falling apart, they start changing. Not in a good way. Their peace fades, their calm disappears, they become restless, irritated, unstable. You didn't do anything to them directly, yet their inner world starts shaking. That's not coincidence, and it's not karma acting dramatically. It's exposure happening naturally. When someone sends harm through thoughts, words, jealousy, or spiritual intent, they believe the damage will land on you. But what they don't understand is this: intent has weight. And if it can't reach its target, it doesn't vanish. It turns inward. That's why the sender starts feeling uncomfortable in their own skin. Their sleep gets disturbed. Their mind races. Their emotions feel heavier than usual. The same darkness they tried to project becomes something they have to sit with. This isn't revenge, and it's important to understand that. You're not winning because they're suffering. You're not doing anything to cause their unraveling. It happens because your presence doesn't match what they're sending. You carry clarity, even if you're quiet, stability, even if you're tired. And when unstable intentions meet steady energy, they don't stick. They expose themselves. Think of it like light entering a room. Light doesn't chase shadows around or fight them. It simply turns on, and suddenly, everything is visible. Dust in the air, cracks in the walls. Things that were hidden become obvious. That's what happens around you. People's true motives surface. Their masks slip without you pulling them off. They say things they didn't plan to say. They react emotionally when you stay calm. They reveal more than they realize. Many so-called spiritual attacks fail long before they reach you because the person sending them can't carry the weight of their own intent. Holding negativity takes energy. Holding malice takes focus. Holding jealousy eats away at peace. While you're moving forward, they're stuck managing the chaos they created inside themselves. And over time, that imbalance shows. You might notice that people who once seemed confident around you now feel uneasy. People who smiled easily now seem tense. People who talked behind your back now avoid eye contact. That's not because you changed toward them. It's because they can't hide from themselves anymore. Your presence acts like a mirror, not one you hold up intentionally, but one that exists just by you being who you are. This is why you don't need to confront or defend yourself. Exposure doesn't require explanation. It unfolds on its own. The truth has a way of surfacing when it's under pressure, and dark intentions apply pressure to the sender first. You don't live in spiritual fear anymore. There was a time when fear had a strong hold on you. Not loud fear, but quiet fear. The kind that sits in the back of your mind and shapes your decisions. Fear of losing people. Fear of things going wrong. Fear of being judged, misunderstood, or left behind. That fear didn't make you weak. It made you human. But at some point, something shifted. You didn't stop caring about life. You stopped being controlled by fear. You didn't become reckless or careless. You became grounded. You learned that worrying didn't protect you, and panic didn't prepare you. You saw that fear only drained your energy without solving anything. Slowly, you stopped jumping to worst-case scenarios. You stopped letting imaginary outcomes rule your emotions. That calm didn't come overnight. It was built through experience, disappointment, and learning what you can and can't control. Fear is powerful because it multiplies energy. When someone is afraid, every thought grows bigger. Every situation feels heavier. That's why fear is often used as a tool, because it opens doors inside the mind. When fear enters, everything else follows. Doubt, confusion, overthinking. That's how spiritual harm gains strength. It doesn't arrive strong. It grows through panic. But you don't live there anymore. Now, when something unexpected happens, you pause instead of spiraling. You breathe instead of reacting. You observe instead of assuming the worst. That pause changes everything. Without fear, energy has nothing to latch onto. Threats lose intensity. Pressure fades faster. What once felt overwhelming now feels manageable. Calm doesn't mean nothing hurts. It means nothing controls you. This is why calm people are often misunderstood. From the outside, it can look like indifference. But inside, it's clarity. Calm people aren't detached from reality. They're anchored in it. And in any form of conflict, especially spiritual, anchored people are difficult to shake. They don't feed chaos. They don't fuel drama. They don't amplify negativity with panic. Spiritual attacks, negative intentions, and emotional pressure all rely on one thing: reaction. Fear is the spark. Without it, the fire never starts. You don't fight the attack, you starve it. By staying calm, you deny it the fuel it needs to grow. That's why things that once felt threatening now pass through your life without leaving the same damage. This calm didn't come from being lucky. It came from facing fear enough times to realize it lies You learned that fear promises protection but delivers exhaustion. Now you choose steadiness instead, and that choice quietly protects you. You don't need to prove strength. You don't need to appear fearless. Your calm speaks for you. In a world that feeds on panic, being grounded is power, and that's why fear no longer has authority over you. You detach from outcomes, and that made you untouchable. There was a time when outcomes meant everything to you. You replayed situations in your head, wondering how they would end, what people would say, and whether things would finally turn in your favor. You wanted fairness. You wanted closure. You wanted proof that the effort you were putting in would lead somewhere good. That need didn't come from greed. It came from hope. But over time, carrying that hope so tightly became exhausting. Then something changed. You didn't stop caring about your life or your future. You stopped gripping it so hard. You realized that constantly worrying about results was draining your energy and keeping you stuck. You saw how much of your peace depended on things you couldn't control, other people's actions, timing, opinions, or decisions. And slowly, without making a big announcement, you loosened your grip. That detachment was powerful, even though it felt uncomfortable at first. Letting go of outcomes doesn't mean giving up. It means trusting yourself enough to move forward without demanding guarantees. You learn to focus on what you could do in the present instead of obsessing over how everything would end. That shift changed how life interacted with you. Spiritual attacks, negative intentions, and emotional pressure all try to do the same thing. They target the future. They try to create fear about what's coming next. They want you anxious about loss, failure, or injustice. But when you stop clinging to a specific version of the future, there's nothing to sabotage. You become flexible instead of fragile. Now, when plans change, you adjust instead of collapsing. When people misunderstand you, you don't chase explanations. When outcomes don't match expectations, you don't see it as punishment. You see it as redirection. That flexibility makes you hard to harm. You don't break when things don't go your way because your sense of self isn't tied to one result. Instead of crashing into resistance, you flow around it. Like water, you move where there's space. You don't waste energy fighting walls that won't move. You find another route. That doesn't mean life is easy, it means you're adaptable. And adaptability is protection. People who try to disrupt you often expect you to panic when things don't work out. They expect disappointment to weaken you, but detachment keeps you steady. You don't freeze in uncertainty. You keep moving, and movement is the enemy of stagnation and control. This doesn't make you cold or careless. You still have goals. You still have standards, but you no longer hand your peace over to outcomes you can't control. You trust that whatever unfolds, you'll handle it when it arrives. That trust makes you untouchable. When you stop clinging, you stop breaking. When you stop demanding certainty, you gain freedom. And in that freedom, nothing has the power to trap you the way it once did. You don't seek validation from the same level anymore. There was a time when validation mattered to you more than you realized. You wanted acknowledgement from certain people. You cared about being seen as capable, worthy, or important in their eyes. Not because you were insecure by nature, but because those people were once your reference point. Their approval felt like proof that you were on the right path, and when it didn't come, it stung. But over time, something quietly changed. You didn't wake up one day and decide, I don't care anymore. It happened naturally as you grew. Your experiences expanded. Your understanding deepened. You started seeing that the people whose approval you chased were operating from a limited space. Their standards were small, their vision was narrow, and without drama or announcements, you stopped needing recognition from that level. You didn't brag about growth. You didn't cut people off loudly. You just outgrew the room. This is where many energy attacks come from. They often don't come from strangers. They come from people who once felt equal to you or above you. People who were comfortable when you stayed within a certain role. When you stopped seeking their validation, something shifted in them. They felt the distance. They felt the imbalance. And instead of growing themselves, they reacted. But here's the truth. Attacks only land where attention still exists. If part of you still needs approval, that's where energy can enter. Once you stop seeking validation from a certain level, you're no longer tuned into that frequency. It's like changing the radio station. The signal may still be broadcasting, but you're not listening anymore. You don't block these attacks consciously. You don't build walls or shields. You're simply not available. Your inner world is no longer organized around their opinions, comparisons, or judgments. You've moved on mentally and emotionally, and that movement creates distance that can't be crossed. This is why attempts to pull you back often feel clumsy or desperate. Comments don't land the same. Subtle insults feel obvious instead of painful. Provocation feels childish instead of threatening. You see it for what it is. Someone trying to reconnect to a version of you that no longer exists. And that's frustrating for people who haven't grown. They're sending energy from a place you no longer live in. They're trying to reach you using rules that don't apply to you anymore. You don't need to defend yourself because you're not competing. You don't need to explain yourself because you're not asking for permission. Your growth already answered the question. This doesn't make you better than anyone. It just makes you aligned with where you are now. And alignment is powerful. When you stop needing validation from the same level, you stop being affected by its limitations. You didn't disappear. You evolved. And when you evolve, what once had access to you simply doesn't anymore. Your silence is spiritual authority. For a long time, people misunderstood your silence. They thought you had nothing to say. They assumed you were confused, hurt, or unable to defend yourself. Some even believed staying quiet meant you were losing. But the truth is very different. Your silence didn't come from weakness. It came from understanding. It came from realizing that not everything deserves a response, and not everyone deserves access to your thoughts. Earlier in life, you explained yourself a lot. You clarified your intentions. You defended your choices. You tried to make people see your side so they wouldn't misunderstand you. That came from a good place. You wanted peace, fairness, and clarity. But over time, you noticed something important. Explaining didn't always lead to understanding. Sometimes it just drained you. So you stopped. That moment changed everything. When you stopped explaining yourself, you stopped leaking energy. Every argument you avoided saved strength. Every unnecessary justification you dropped kept your inner world intact. You learned that your peace was more valuable than being right. Silence became a way of protecting what matters most, your clarity. Silence isn't empty. It's contained. It's focused. It holds power because it doesn't scatter energy in every direction. When you speak less, your presence speaks more. People feel the shift even if they can't explain it. You're no longer available for emotional tug-of-war. You're no longer handing out pieces of yourself to be debated or misused. This containment acts like armor. Not visible, not dramatic, but effective. Negative intentions and spiritual attacks rely on openings. They look for emotional cracks overreactions, or moments of self-doubt. Silence closes those doors. When there's nothing to argue with, nothing to provoke, nothing to pull at, the attack loses momentum. You might notice that people try harder at first. They push for a reaction. They say louder things. They repeat themselves. That's because they're used to your responses. When silence replaces reaction, they don't know how to adjust. The dynamic changes, and control slips away from them. Silence also shifts how people treat you. When you stop explaining, others stop assuming they can question your every move. Your boundaries become clear without being spoken. You don't need to announce them, they're felt. That's authority. Quiet authority doesn't demand attention. It naturally commands respect. This doesn't mean you never speak. It means when you do, your words carry weight. They're intentional, measured, grounded. You speak from clarity, not emotion. And that makes your voice stronger than constant noise ever could. Your silence isn't avoidance. It's mastery. It shows you understand yourself well enough not to seek validation through explanation. And in that understanding, you become difficult to disturb. Silence didn't make you invisible. It made you solid. You already accepted the worst and survived it. There's a kind of strength that doesn't come from confidence or bravery. It comes from having already faced the worst and realizing you survived it. At some point in your life, you went through an ending that didn't come with a funeral or goodbye speeches. It happened quietly, inside you. The version of yourself you once relied on didn't make it through. And that loss changed you forever. You lost beliefs you once held tightly. You lost expectations about how life was supposed to go. You lost relationships, dreams, and parts of your identity that once felt permanent. There was a time when you didn't recognize yourself anymore. That emptiness wasn't dramatic. It was heavy and confusing. But instead of running from it, you stayed. You felt it. You learned how to live with less certainty and more honesty. That experience was your internal death. When someone goes through something like that, fear changes. You're not fearless. You just know what endings feel like. You know the world doesn't actually end when something falls apart. You know pain doesn't always destroy. It can clear space. That understanding removes the power of threats. You can't scare someone with an ending they've already lived through. This is why attempts to harm you don't land the way others expect. External destruction only works when someone is still afraid of losing themselves. But you already lost who you thought you were and rebuilt from what was left. You're no longer protecting a fragile identity. You're living from experience. When people try to intimidate you, something inside you stays calm. Not because you don't care, but because you recognize the pattern. You've been here before, in emotional darkness, uncertainty, and collapse, and you walked out. That memory stays with you. It anchors you. You don't cling to old versions of yourself anymore. You let them go when they no longer fit. That makes you flexible, adaptable, hard to trap. When something ends now, you don't panic. You assess, you adjust, you move forward. That ability is earned, not learned. This doesn't mean life stopped hurting. It means pain no longer has authority over you. You know that rebuilding is possible because you've done it before, piece by piece, often alone. That knowledge changes how the world interacts with you. People who haven't faced their own internal ending often fear loss deeply. They cling. They threaten. They project. But you don't respond the same way. You've already walked through the fire. You know what survives. You're not untouched because nothing ever happened to you. You're untouchable because something did, and you lived through it. Once you've died internally and returned stronger, external destruction loses its power. Endings no longer scare you, and when endings don't scare you, you become impossible to threaten. Closing line you can use. So if you're still here, still standing, still breathing, understand this clearly. It's not luck, it's not coincidence, and it's definitely not because nothing was sent your way. You're protected because your story isn't finished. And the more they try to end it early, the louder your existence becomes.